Hey everyone, the deep divisions you see in American Christianity today, they feel like a really modern problem, right? But what if the key to understanding all of it lies in a startling parallel from 2,000 years ago? According to our source material, to really see our present clearly, we've got to look into an ancient mirror.
So this is the big idea we're digging into, that to get a handle on the political labels of today, we actually need to understand the religious factions of the ancient past. Now that's a pretty bold claim, so let's unpack who these groups actually were.
All right, first, let's just quickly set the stage with what we all know. The Christian landscape in America often feels like it's split right down the middle into two main camps, liberal and conservative. And these labels, well, they often have just as much to do with politics as they do with faith, and that creates some really deep fractures.
Okay, now let's rewind the clock way back. The source we're looking at argues that this modern dynamic is a striking reflection of what was happening in first-century Judea under Roman rule. You had all these different Jewish groups passionately arguing about the right way to live out their faith and ultimately to bring about God's kingdom.
And in that environment, three big factions popped up: the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essenes. Now here's the crucial part. They all wanted the same thing. Their ultimate goal was to establish God's kingdom on earth. But man, their methods for getting there could not have been more different.
So first up, you had the Sadducees. Think of them as the establishment, the political insiders of their day. Their entire strategy was about being pragmatic. I mean, they worked with the Roman authorities, their overlords, just to keep their grip on power. They believed that the best way to restore the kingdom was through political stability. They were so focused on the here and now that they even rejected core spiritual ideas, like the resurrection of the dead.
Next, you've got the Pharisees. So, if the Sadducees were the political elite, you can think of the Pharisees as the guardians of religious law and public opinion.
Their path was all about piety. They taught that if everyone just followed the law of Moses, followed it perfectly, then God's kingdom would arrive. But our source points out that this often became a tool they used to get rich, control people, and come down really hard on anyone who didn't meet their strict standards.
And that brings us to the third group, the Essenes. They took a completely different path. They looked at the corruption in both politics and in mainstream religion and basically just checked out of society altogether.
Yeah, their whole strategy was total separation and purity. They went out into the desert, formed these isolated communes, and were just convinced that the whole world was a lost cause. They were just waiting for a huge divine apocalypse to come, destroy all the wicked people, and prove that they were the truly righteous ones all along.
So this table just lays it all out perfectly. You've got these three competing strategies: the Sadducees seeking power through pragmatism, the Pharisees through piety, and the Essenes through purity. Three totally different roads, all supposedly leading to the exact same place.
But right in the middle of all this, a new voice shows up, and the source argues that Jesus of Nazareth took a hard look at all three of these popular, powerful movements and offered a really sharp critique.
In the source's telling, Jesus saw these well-traveled paths, the path of politics, the path of legalism, and the path of separatism, as being completely wrong. He called them the broad highways, super easy to follow, but leading nowhere good.
So what was the alternative? This narrow gate. And it wasn't about grabbing power. It was actually about giving it up. The source describes it as a path of accepting injustice and suffering. One that didn't lead to winning on earth, but to a cross, and then a resurrection. This was a total flip of the script from what the big factions were selling.
Okay, so how does all this ancient history actually connect back to the Christian divisions we see today? Well, this is where that mirror really starts to show us a reflection.
And here it is, the direct comparison. The source is arguing that trying to filter faith through the modern political lenses of liberal and conservative is basically the 21st century version of picking one of those broad highways. It's an attempt to find the kingdom using a worldly system of power, just like those ancient factions did.
And the source gives a really serious warning here, one that echoes the original message. If you keep going down these political paths, you're missing the entire point. So much so that it could lead to being shut out of the very kingdom you're trying so hard to build.
So what's the end result of all this? The final point our source makes is all about perception, how this internal fight looks to people on the outside looking in.
When the secular world looks at a faith that's so deeply split against itself along political lines, it doesn't see power. It doesn't see truth. It sees weakness. It sees contradiction. It sees foolishness.
The infighting just completely undermines the message. And the source closes with this really powerful analogy. Just like Pontius Pilate looked at all the feuding religious leaders and saw their squabbles as pretty powerless and insignificant, the argument is that the world today does the same thing. It just dismisses a Christianity that's defined by its own political fights.
And that brings us to our final question. The source presents this whole historical parallel as a mirror that's being held up to us right now. The reflection shows factions, it shows broad highways, and it shows a message that might be getting lost in the search for worldly power. And so the question it leaves us with is this: what are we supposed to do with what we see in that reflection?